Welcome to Rebuilding a Model Steam Plant. Part 25, a gas burner mounting, which is an improvement on the one previously shown. To increase the mechanical strength of the unit, this one is also silver soldered together. After making this mount, I paint the base using heat-resistant spray paint. There is a good reason why I'm showing different variations of making simple things like a gas burner mounting, because this component is quite important. It is essential that the gas burner is supported properly. The previous angle clamps were too small, and owing to the curvature of the base of the burner, I could not grip it properly. The solution to this problem is to use two pieces of brass angle that are a good bit larger. But when I hold them together, they are far too wide to support the burner, so I need to cut some off, and this is a very simple job. I hold the two pieces of brass together with the burner in the middle. Then I use a felt tip pen to make a mark in the centre. Coincidentally, when I held the smaller piece of brass angle on the inside of the larger piece, the felt tip pen lines were in exactly the right place. Over now to my small metal cutting bandsaw. Unfortunately, I cannot get the guide any lower than this, so I'm carefully guiding the blade by hand, and as you can see, it's trying its best to wander about. The red cross means don't put your hand close to the blade like I'm showing here. When you get near to the end of the cut, you could either use a push stick or just pull it through as shown. I mark the position for the holes using the original pieces of brass, and I've drilled them and everything fits together very well. Thankfully, without having to file the holes to the right size. I drilled 3 holes in the sides of the pieces of brass angle, and these holes will accept 3 machine screws to hold the burner in place. Via eBay, I bought some brass dome head 4BA and 5BA machine screws, but they haven't arrived yet. For the purposes of illustrating the principle, once again I'm using these steel 5BA machine screws. Now it's time to fix both pieces of brass angle to the mounting bolts. The principle is exactly the same as I showed with the smaller rails. The position of the clamp bolts is now perfect. And as before, the burner is sat on top of the nuts which hold the burner support in place. This allows air to go underneath the burner. Immediately a problem occurs that I had overlooked. Because of the higher position of the clamping screws, as I tighten the bolts to hold the burner, the pieces of brass are moving slightly. This is not good, although it does hold the burner very well, as you can see. Moving away from the burner for a moment, it's now top tip time. This is a very simple and obvious tip if you think about it. I'm using a Barco spanner to hold a simple washer in the corner of the steel plate. Then I use a felt tip pen to make a mark like this on the steel plate. And once I do this on every corner, I then drill a hole in the centre of each of the black dots, and these will be the mountings for the base plate onto the baseboard. It's common sense really, and there's another way of doing it which is simpler. Use a square nut instead of a round one, and use this as a template to mark the positions for holes. It's not very technical, I know, but it's quick. At my age, particularly with my health conditions, I just need to get on with the job with a minimum of fuss and complication. It's also a good idea, and this of course would work with a round washer, to use a set square or even a metal block against each side of the metal that you're marking. I'm sure there must be some sort of tool available for drilling holes in corners of metal. But I don't possess such a device, and doing it my way does appear to work, and the mounting holes do look to be okay. To strengthen the mounting, I decided to silver solder the 2 pieces of brass angle together. Using a larger burner head than normal, because I need to generate plenty of heat, I'm using far too much silver solder as usual, but I will get a very strong joint between the 2 pieces of brass angle. You have to be careful when silver soldering brass. If you get it too hot, it will melt. I've done that quite a few times. I'm getting the temperature very hot, but not too hot as to melt the brass. Now an extra special treat. These are shots of the metal cooling, and the video is running at twice normal speed. When the metal was fairly cool, I dropped it into the water container. A quick word of caution, never quench the metal when the silver solder is still molten. Back on the workbench in the inner part of the workshop, I'm starting the clean-up operation of the piece of brass, now a piece of U-section. I'm just using a piece of Scotch-Brite wrapped around a ruler, and this seemed to remove most of the oxidization. And now it's almost painting time for the base. A quick rub over with some Scotch-Brite to remove my fingerprints. Then I cut some pieces of silicone rubber tubing to fit over the end of the bolts because I don't want to paint these. Now it's time to go back into the outer part of the workshop for the painting job. I'm spraying this part with some high temperature paint. I don't really like this paint. It does what it says on the tin. It doesn't burn off very easily. I think there's a lot of graphite in it. The paint dries to a matte finish, but when you rub the surface with some wet or dry sandpaper, it gets very shiny. You will notice that I painted the underside first. I freely admit that I am applying far too much paint. This should give a good covering because this part will never be seen again once it's bolted to the plant. So any paint imperfections on this side are irrelevant. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the patrons who asked about my health. Apparently, the prostate cancer I have is not where they thought it was. Nothing much is happening and they need to know more about it, so I have to go in for something called a transperineal biopsy, and I can't wait for that. So far, it has taken the NHS, our National Health Service, over a year to get so far. By paying to go and see a private specialist, he assures me that he will have a word with them to speed up the process. The good news, though, I suppose, is that the MRI scan that I had recently showed no change from a year ago. Here's a tin of high-temperature paint, and here is the other side after I painted it. I didn't apply quite as much paint to this because the edges are visible when the boiler's in place. I'd better mention that the 4 outer bolts are just some that I pushed through to act as feet to lift the newly painted part off the board. And now a special treat for all those very strange viewers who like to watch paint drying. And that's it from me for now. I'm not going to sit here watching this, because I am normal. And come to mention it, so am I. Me too. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.